thank you for joining us for this episode of Leading Change. I'm Ema Roloff, and I've got Chris with me today, and we're going to be talking about an idea that he calls data diabetes. Chris, can you give everybody an introduction?
Sure. So Chris Surdak, about 30 years of experience in a wide range of technology fields. Actually started out as a satellite systems engineer, so former rocket scientist, and have been involved in the leading edge of really every new technology wave since about 1995. Have finished 3 books. I'm working on my next book, which is part of our topic today, Data Diabetes, which is all about how data is making organizations sick and what can they do to try to get better.
So I wasn't nervous about this interview until you mentioned that you used to be a rocket scientist. But now I think that I've got it out there. We can move forward with the understanding that I have never done anything quite that intense in my life.
Recovered rocket scientist. Yeah.
There you go. So, Chris, I guess could you start by sharing a little bit about what the idea behind data diabetes is and kind of describe that for us?
Absolutely. So I've been heavily involved, even back in my rocket days. I mean, you would calculate trajectories and so forth. So I've been heavily involved in data my entire career, but really specifically tied to big data, predictive analytics, all the creepy stuff that we do with technology these days. And right after the pandemic, I did a research project talking to dozens of corporate executives about what they learned from responding to the pandemic. And it was very interesting that all of them talked about having data problems. But as we dug deeper into these so-called data problems, it was actually very evident that they were actually having decision-making problems. The thing that was consistent across all these organizations is nearly all of them had been agonizing for years, if not decades. Will we allow workers to work from home? Are we going to implement something like Zoom or other video conferencing capabilities? and they had wasted enormous amounts of time and energy in arguing over should we do it or should we not. And then over the course of a long weekend, they just did it. and as soon as you forced them to make a decision, they could do so and do so very quickly. And the world didn't come to an end and the business didn't go bankrupt. In fact, most of them were more productive. And so that was really what brought about this notion of data diabetes. Like a diabetic, and my wife was diabetic. I had friends that were diabetic. So you get hungry and you get thirsty for sugar, but when you eat more sugar, it makes you sicker. And so the analogy really hung with these organizations that wish they had more reports, wish they had more data or better data or faster data, and they still couldn't make a decision. So they were data diabetic. More data was making them sicker.
So how do we go about diagnosing if this is an issue within our own organization? And I actually tagged you in a comment the other day on LinkedIn because I knew we were getting ready for this interview, but somebody asked, like, where do we need more data to drive decisions within an organization? And I was like, spoiler, Chris is coming to talk to us about the fact that maybe it's not more data that we need, but a different way of dealing with it. So can you share a little bit about how you kind of talk through that idea with organizations to see if they have that problem?
Absolutely. And in the course of the again, dozens of conversations, I actually came up with a self-scoring test or a survey you can do of yourself to see just how data diabetic you are. First and foremost, almost like the human disease, like if you're overweight, you're probably diabetic. If you're more than 20 years old as a company, you're probably data diabetic. And I should probably do a little comedy routine, like you might be a redneck, you might be data diabetic if. But among the examples are, do you have a chief data officer? That alone implies that you have a data problem and you had to assign someone to deal with that data problem. If you are trying to implement things like automation, RPA, or artificial intelligence, and you are woefully failing at it, probably data diabetic. If you like creating reports that tell you what happened last week, last month, last quarter, I call that digital self-flagellation. Let's run a report so we can beat ourselves up over something that already happened and we can't fix it. Great sign of data diabetes. And if you have spent and continue to spend a lot of money on new tools, techniques, getting data in more people's hands, and you don't get a business impact from doing that, or in fact, your costs rise with no increase in value, you're almost certainly data diabetic. Those are just some of the very easy to diagnose things, but there's a whole list that I think I have 90 something questions in the survey.
So we go through the survey, or even just the gut check of like, man, we are struggling to implement these new tools, or we recognize that maybe this is a problem that we've got. How do we treat this issue, and how do we start to move past it?
One of the things I stumbled on is that there are three things that we do with data in organizations, just like there's three things that our bodies do when we input calories. And those three things are discover, decide, defend. Discover is coming up with new ideas, new insights, R&D in a company, for example, product development in a company. So that's the discover part of using data. And in that, I need a lot of variety of data. I need to put different things together and ask new questions to come up with new answers. So that's about variety. Defend is all the stuff I do to stay out of jail, all the stuff I do to pay taxes. So it's my finance, my accounting, it's legitimizing decisions that were made. And can I go back and relook at it and justify what was done? Anything that has to do with control of capital is defend activities. And that we invest in that's all about volume. I need lots and lots of information, right? Because one email or one check could be the difference between being guilty and being innocent, so to speak. So defend is all about volume. And then finally, there's decide, which is the actual execution of the business. Do we turn left? Do we turn right? And that's all about velocity. So if you go back to the original definition of big data from my friend Doug Laney, which was big data is volume, variety, velocity. Those are the three things that you constitute big data. You can't not do defend, because that's how you stay in business, and that's how you avoid, prisons and regulators and stuff like that. And you really can't discount discover very much, because if eventually you run out of products and services and you no longer develop as a company. Decide is notably underserved. And this is this idea of one more report and I can make a better decision. So I'm going to wait until I get that report. And that was fine 20 years ago, back when we last really re-engineered our business processes. But think about the world of 2002, 1999, you name it. There was no such thing as an iPhone. We were using 56K baud modems to connect to America Online to surf the web. Yahoo was like leading edge. Google was barely started. There was no social media, right? And so we built our business processes back then, and we haven't really fixed them since then. We built our business processes back then to metabolize data at 1999 rates, and now we live in a world about to be the iPhone 14 and social media taking over the world and so forth. So again, we're trying to metabolize a 48-ounce big gulp soda, and our pancreas just can't handle it. So what do we do about it? First and foremost is recognize that you have a problem, right? Get diagnosed, and it's relatively easy to do that. And then understand which of these three things, discover, decide, defend, is underserved, and it's almost always decide, which means that I need to improve my decision-making velocity, which means I don't need more data, I need faster data, and I need to be able to act upon that faster data more quickly. That's fundamentally where most people have the problem, and that's fundamentally how you start dealing with it.
Well, thank you so much for joining us to go through this. And again, another little spoiler for everybody. We will probably be teaming up again closer to the release of the book. So hopefully we can get everybody's eyes on that. But in the meantime, if you're not already, please go follow Chris on LinkedIn and make sure that you're keeping up with everything as he gets closer to publishing the book on this idea. But thank you so much again, Chris, for joining us. And thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Leading Change. If you liked what you saw, be sure to subscribe and come back weekly for more expert interviews on digital transformation, change management, and emerging technologies.